Some people think the idea that we're all going to lose our jobs to AI is just hype. This week, I'm talking to one person who might make it a reality. This podcast is brought to you by Atlassian Rovo, the AI that takes your team from AI novice to AI native. Welcome to Platformer. I'm Casey Newton, and my guest this week is Boris Cherny of Anthropic. He's the creator and head of Claude Code, which is the fastest growing AI coding tool in the world, and may also be a working preview of fully automated software development. So if our first two guests on this series, which is about AI and jobs, try to calm us down about the risks, I suspect that Boris is going to rile us up. He has said that software engineering jobs will start to go away as soon as the end of this year, and I'm really looking forward to pressing him on that one. But before that, as always, we're going to begin with the numbers. Each week, we kick off the show with fresh data trying to help us make sense of what is actually happening on the ground. And to do that, once again, we're bringing in Platformer Fellow and Gen Z AI correspondent, Ella Markianos. Ella, how are you this week?
I'm wonderful. I've been reading Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, and it's kind of changing my life.
How so?
That has nothing to do with AI. It's just truly excellent human-generated writing. I mean, there is like a parallel between The Ring and AI. That I always think about. It's like you want the power, and then like maybe there's in fact something like insidious that comes with the power of AI we see again and again.
It's true. Well, I will say, I'm always glad to see you reading human-generated writing, as you call it. But I have one caution for you, which you may have already considered, which is that people in Silicon Valley who read The Lord of the Rings do then go on to start some of the most terrifying companies ever with names selected from Lord of the Rings. So, of course, Palantir, Anduril. So have you had any inkling yet of like a sort of a name that you've seen and that's made you think I could probably do something really evil with a company named after this?
Like Minus Morgul, it's in stealth right now, so like maybe we should cut it out of the podcast. But I have some hope that we're going to flip the narrative on Sauron related tech company names. We're going to do really great things with our wonderful team of undead horsemen.
Fantastic. We look forward to learning more about this company in the months ahead. In the meantime, though, I wonder if you have seen anything interesting this week related to AI and jobs.
Yeah. So there's this study from Microsoft. They've surveyed 20,000 AI users. So worth keeping in mind, we're like narrowing down to the population of people who are like actually using AI at their jobs. And there's this thing they're calling the transformation paradox, which is basically 65% of people who are using AI at their jobs, they're worried that they'll fall behind if they don't adopt AI quickly. And also people are finding it useful. Like 58% say they're producing work that they couldn't have if they didn't have the AI they have. Like a year ago, they wouldn't be producing this kind of work. 66% say it lets them spend more time on high value tasks. So like, one, people are using it and they're liking it. Two, they're worried that bad stuff they won't be able to keep up if they don't use it more. However, the like really big contrasting statistic is only 13% say they're rewarded for experimenting with AI at work. So basically, there's this gap between like appetite for AI use and like the institutions themselves that people are working at.
This is so interesting to me, and I think it gets at something very real based on my own conversations with people at their jobs lately, which is that AI is like all stick and no carrot. The prototypical CEO is conducting an all hands saying, we're going to AI all of the things immediately. You must be AIing at all times. And yet, when workers go through with this, it doesn't seem like there's actually much reward waiting for them on the other side.
Yeah. And I think another thing that a second Microsoft study found like a little earlier this year was when managers actively model AI use goes up like 17%. And people also trust agents 30% more, which, like, should you be trusting the agents? That's another question. But I think that there are a few different ways you can, like, try to encourage your employees to use AI. One is like, AI is the future. Guys, please use AI. And another is like, hello, direct reports of mine. Here are like the specific ways like I use AI as they're surveying here at my job. And
Yeah.
like, here's how you could try to do a similar thing. And it turns out like that kind of strategy does seem to get results.
That makes sense. I mean, my question is like, what would this look like if managers were actually financially rewarding their workers for using AI? It's like, right now, so many people understandably are reluctant to use AI because they do not want to train their own replacement. They do not want to like hasten the end of their own job. But I think if they had reason to believe, hey, if you become more productive because of this tool and you raise the output of this company, like you are going to share in the spoils of this. I don't know if this idea just comes across as like pure communism to Silicon Valley, but like I have not heard basically anyone who seems to be trying this lately.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like to some extent, there's this thing going on where at least workplaces are like subsidizing tokens, which sometimes I would like to bring up doesn't end super well.
Well,
So
let's hear
at
about
the same
this.
so at the same time as we're seeing this like gap between in fact like worker demand and like how much managers are rewarding their workers for using AI, we're also seeing quote unquote token maxing at major tech companies
Now, do
where
you identify as a token maxer?
I'm not token maxing. Like
Okay.
I'm not like running agents at night. Like when I get an AI to do code for me, I'm kind of like sitting there. Like I know what it's doing. There just like isn't any task for me as a journalist where I'm like, I need to have Claude make like an enormous code repo where it's like constantly thinking to itself or something. Like I don't even know what like
Yeah.
non-destructive activity I would do.
Well,
Um
I told Claude to rebuild Palantir from first principles, and that started to burn so many tokens. We actually have to pull the plug on this. So thank you for your moderate. I'm in favor of token moderating. Okay, token minimizing. We don't need to do that, but token maxing is a bridge too far. But you're saying that there are companies in Silicon Valley where they are truly token maxing. Do you have a good example for us?
Yeah. So Amazon. So previously we got some stuff from Meta. This year, or this week, this year a lot of stuff has happened. This week, some Amazon employees reported to the Financial Times that basically now that Amazon has adopted this new tool, MeshClaw, which is an internal Amazon tool inspired by OpenClaw and is encouraging workers to use it, and also has these leaderboards within teams, like various leaderboards of token usage. Some people, according to employees, are just like running agents, not even that do productive stuff, just like as we saw at Meta, like maybe just sometimes like randomly go in a loop so that their like token usage goes up. And for example, at Meta previously we saw a bit more numbers of like the biggest token usage and the biggest token leaderboard. It was like hundreds of billions of tokens, and it was like an amount that clearly would have cost Meta literally millions of dollars.
Right.
Where like some of that truly was going down the drain. Another thing that I found really interesting about the dynamic described in this Financial Times article is the official word from on high is that it's in fact your token usage is not supposed to be a metric your managers take into account.
Okay.
But employees still think that managers look at it. And so, in fact, they're still just increasing their raw token usage. And then also, Amazon has this high up corporate target for 80% of devs to use AI every week. And so it's like the signal from on high is we want you to be using AI to an extent that people are like, in fact, sometimes at least doing absurd stuff. Where like To me, I'm not there. I'm not one of these managers at Amazon. I don't know as much about how you manage a team of software engineers, but like, I feel like as a dev, I would want less one double speak about like how my AI was being tracked, and like two more productive metrics that like
Yes.
are clearly communicated and relate to how I'm adding value with AI.
Yeah, and I think that this story speaks so well to that Microsoft Work Trend Index that you brought to us at the top of the show, because if workers do not feel like they're going to be rewarded for using AI in a very specific way, they may use it in a very silly way, right? They're going to try to honor like the letter of the intent, which is use AI, but like miss the spirit of it, which is get better at your job. And maybe they would get better at their job if they had a strong financial incentive to be using it in their work. Maybe they wouldn't even burn so many tokens. But Ella, I know one person who probably is not that stressed out about the major burning of tokens that we're seeing all around the industry lately, and that is Boris Cherny, the creator of Claude Code, and somebody without whom I think the token maxing trend might not be possible. And we're going to bring him in and talk to him right after the break. Thanks for joining us, Ella. Not sure how to actually use AI at work? Most AI tools promise to save time, but they sit outside your workflow. They're disconnected from how things actually get done, and they don't make your to-do list any shorter. Atlassian Rovo works where you work, across Jira, Confluence, and the rest of your stack, securely connected to your company's knowledge, context, and permissions. Turn meeting notes into Jira tickets, draft campaign briefs in Confluence. Instantly find the right docs without digging. This isn't generic AI. This is AI that understands how your team actually works. Less searching, less busy work, more progress. That's what an AI native team looks like. Learn more about Rovo at rovo.com. My guest today is Boris Cherny. Boris is the creator and head of Claude Code, the agentic coding tool that Anthropic put out in May of last year. In short, it's a hit, a box that you type words into and spits out code. Within 8 months of launch, Claude Code was responsible for about 4% of all code pushed to GitHub. And by February of this year, it had hit an annual revenue run rate of $2.5 billion, the fastest enterprise product ever to hit that mark. Part of what's fascinating about this is who built it. Boris doesn't have a computer science degree. He studied economics, dropped out of college to run a startup at 18, did a stint at a hedge fund, and then spent 5 years as a principal engineer at Meta before joining Anthropic in late 2024. He didn't even arrive there with a mandate to build a coding tool. He showed up to learn the API, started hacking on a side project that initially just hooked Claude up to AppleScript so it could see what song he was listening to. And within 2 months, he had a version of Claude Code that 20% of Anthropic's engineering team was using on the first day. So our first two guests on this series were somewhat bearish on the idea of AI automation. Aaron Levy from Box and James Manyika from Google both made the case that jobs are just harder to automate than they look, and that while the future is going to bring serious disruptions, that doesn't necessarily mean massive job loss. I think Boris just has a very different perspective. As a software engineer, he is actively working to automate away his own job. He says that 100% of his code is now written by Claude. He ships between 20 and 30 pull requests per day by running 5 Claude agents in parallel across 5 terminal tabs. And he said publicly that within a year, the title software engineer is going to start disappearing, replaced by something that is more like builder. So, as always, when I talk about Anthropic, it's important to say upfront that my fiance works there. You should take that into consideration as you listen. But this was one where I just couldn't imagine talking about the future of AI and jobs without talking to the inventor of Claude Code. So with that, here's my conversation with Boris Cherny. Boris Cherny, welcome to Platformer.
Thanks for having me.
So you joined Anthropic in September 2024, and my understanding is that no one told you to go build a coding product. You were just trying to learn the API. So can you tell us the origin story of Claude Code? Because I've read that it controlled your music.
Yeah, all of these things are true.
Yeah.
I joined this team called the Labs team, which built a bunch of cool stuff. So we built Claude Code. There's like so I built that. There was a different person that built MCP. There was someone that built Skills, and then two other people built the desktop app. And that was essentially the size of the team. It was like a tiny team. We just sort of like built the feature in the course of like a few months, and we didn't know because a lot of these were kind of weird ideas. We had no idea if they were going to work or not. So for I guess like stepping back for Anthropic for a while, the focus has been on the same kind of stuff. It's always been about enterprise. It's always been about coding. It's always been about safety. And we kind of knew that somewhere in this journey, we should probably build some kind of product. Kind of early on in Anthropic, we didn't actually know if we wanted to build products. But
I've
if
heard
we're
this.
if we're building products, then we need to build something coding related because it helps us build better coding models so that everyone can use those models. And it also just like helps us study safety. There's sort of a bunch of reasons to do this. We didn't
Yeah.
know what it should be though. So at the time, if you look at like coding products at the time, they were all like IDEs, IDE extensions. Like the capability of the model back then, this was like Sonnet 3.5. It was not very good yet. So
Right.
if the best it could do was like fancy autocomplete. You wrote a little bit of code and it would like complete the line of code. That's where the model was at. And we had this feeling that there's this like model overhang, or product overhang, and it's this idea that you could build a product that does something that the model is actually totally capable of doing, but just no one has built a product that lets the model do that. And I got to tell you, it's still the same feeling today. There's still this
Really.
like intense feeling the model can just do all these things. There's no product that lets it do that. And so, we wanted to build a coding product, didn't know what it was going to be. And so I just wanted to learn how to use the Anthropic API because I was like, all right, we're going to build a product. I should learn how to use the API so I can build the product. And I just built the cheapest possible thing. It was a little thing that ran in the terminal. It was the thing that I could build so I didn't have to build a user interface or an app. It was just fast. I built this thing in a couple days, and I just started giving it to people to see like if they would use it, how they would use it, just out of curiosity. And I remember like over the next few weeks, more and more people at Anthropic started using it. Like first it was just the people that literally sat around me. Then it was kind of like the next layer of the onion kind of outside of that. And then like a few weeks in, just like a lot of Anthropic was using this every day. And it was weird because it was a little prototype in the terminal. It's like the most engineering possible product. A lot of engineers don't
Yeah.
want to touch a terminal, but they did it
Right.
and
I,
they used it.
I've read that within 5 days of the initial release, half of the engineering team was already using it. And I wonder, as that was happening, did you have a moment of thinking, okay, like software engineering just changed forever? Or are you still sort of iterating on the product and pushing pull requests?
Dude, I was so focused on just shipping this thing. Like
Yeah.
for me, as soon as I got this idea, I just spent like every night, every weekend. This is the only thing that I thought about, the only thing that I worked on. Like I started having dreams about Claude Code back then, and like that's still kind of all I dream about every night. It's just like what should we do next? Like what do we build for the product next? So I think now there's a chance to kind of zoom out a little bit because a lot of people are using it, and we should kind of like there's a lot to learn about the way people are using it. But for a long time, we were just so focused on building. I just didn't even have a chance to think about like, what is this?
Yeah. Was there a moment when you did sort of do that zooming back? Because I have to imagine part of the reason that you're dreaming about it is like you realize that, it might be too like minimizing to say that you stumbled across it, but it does seem like there was a sense of like somewhat accidental discovery here. Was there that moment of like, oh gosh, like, yeah, this is different than some of the other things I've hacked on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of surprise. Like I said, broadly, we knew we wanted to build a coding product, but like no one thought this coding product would be in a terminal. There was a lot of moments of surprise, just so many. The first one was when Claude told me what music I'm listening to, and there was like a couple versions of this, and we actually have like there's a video demo I recorded of this, and we actually just like donated it to a computer museum.
Mm.
Just it's this like very weird historical artifact, like, and it was this video I remember posting it on my Slack, and there was like two people that liked it. There was like two reactions because no one understood what that this would be it. Um, but yeah, the first moment was like I asked Claude, "What music am I listening to?" And it wrote like a little bit of code to like open my music player, and it wrote the code in AppleScript, which I don't know, and like
Mm.
I wouldn't have thought to like write code to answer that. That's crazy, and
Yeah.
it just sort of did it, and I was like, "Wow, this is surprising." It solved the problem in the way I wouldn't have as an engineer, and over the last year and a half, there's been so many moments like that. I just actually had one of these like with Cowork. Um,
Yeah.
every time that we release a new model, I kind of experiment with it and, kind of like see what's the frontier of what this thing can do. Because that's like one of the hardest things about building on a model is it's advancing so fast. You just have to kind of like recalibrate every month, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And I used Cowork for the first time to book a bunch of flights. And usually it works okay. This time it was the first time it worked perfectly. And, anytime I travel, I use Cowork to book it. And yeah, it booked 8 flights, 5 hotels. The only mistake was one of the hotels was just like way over budget. Yeah, and I just thought, okay, this might be like a little too pricey. I think it was like 5,000 a night or something. And I was
Listen,
like, please.
Cowork wants you to have a great time when at your stay,
And I was like, please rebook this one. But then, otherwise, like it just like worked for like a couple hours and did all this. It was
Yeah.
so cool. Like I just feel the surprise like every week, every month.
So I'm gonna get to Cowork in a bit, but this feels like a moment to zoom out a bit, from the story of initial discovery, spreads rapidly through Anthropic, and now has become a default tool for a very quickly growing number of engineers. And it is one of the products I think that is sort of making this question of jobs automation feel really salient, at least for the software engineers, but maybe more folks than that. So during our first episode, Aaron Levy was talking to me about the same subject, and he said he didn't see jobs going anywhere, that there's always going to be a kind of last mile of human work that the software can't do. You have publicly predicted that the title software engineer could start to go away as soon as this year. So is Aaron wrong about this?
I think there's a bunch of stuff that's true and a bunch of stuff that we don't know.
Okay.
I mean, like the trends are just, it's this exponentials. Exponentials are very hard to think in. So
Yeah.
honestly, everyone that's saying that they know, no one actually knows. We're all guessing, and some of these are like educated guesses based on what we're seeing and based on history. I think what's going to happen is a few things. One is there's going to be a lot of companies that need less engineers because engineers are more productive. So you just don't need as many engineers to do the same work. I think at the same time, there's going to be a lot of companies that need a lot more engineers because every engineer is more productive. The company can do more things. It can start more products. It can create more businesses. And you see this with our team. Like we are constantly bottlenecked on good engineers. We are hiring as quickly as we can. And there's a lot of companies and a lot of our customers are exactly the same. So I think both things are going to happen. And it sort of depends on the company and it depends on the business. And I think there's this other thing happening where all the roles are kind of blending together in this kind of interesting way that I don't think anyone would have predicted. Like, our manager, Fiona, she has not coded in like 15 years. And she joined Claude Code and now she's coding. And,
Yeah.
Kat, our product manager, codes. And, like Megan, our designer, codes. Like everyone on the team codes. Like you don't have to be an engineer anymore. And so this is what makes me think that over time, if you kind of project this trend a little bit, what's going to happen is everyone that's not an engineer is going to code a little bit more. Engineers, like me, I haven't coded in 6 months. I'm like building stuff all day, but I haven't written a line of code in 6 months, like over 6 months now. And so I just see it all kind of blending into one thing. Like we can call it a builder, we can keep calling it an engineer, we can call it a product manager. I don't know what the title is, but the role
Got
is
it.
changing.
So the way that we conceive of these roles is definitely going to change, but what that means for like how many jobs are available at which companies is still very unclear.
Yeah, and I think history, has a lot of examples, like in different ways. Like, like the tractor was invented. I was actually just like reading about this the other day. Tractors were invented in the 1890s. It was this guy, John Froelich, invented it in like Iowa or something.
That
And
sounds
at
right.
and at the time, if you look at like the way that farm work worked, it was all horse powered. You needed horses to do farm work. And even though tractors were invented in the 1890s, it wasn't until the 60s in the US that there were more tractors than horses.
Hmm.
It took like
Hmm.
70 years. And it's sort of like, if you look at the trend, like the number of tractors went up, the number of horses went down. Both things happened, and the intersection was in the 60s. And there was a bunch of reasons for this, right? Like the technology of tractors was magical. It could make it so you can harvest a lot more crops. Your productivity was a lot higher. But at the same time, if you're a farmer and you want to learn how to use a tractor, you need to learn. Like it takes training. And at the beginning, the tractors were expensive. So, actually in a lot of cases, you still wanted like horses because it was still cheaper. And they were like not very good at first. Like maybe you could use it for like wheat, but maybe not for corn. And so it actually took a long time for someone to make a tractor that would work for corn and that would work for like okra and, like all the stuff that
Right.
you're, using this machinery for. And that just took like a while to figure out. And I think the thing that we're seeing right now is like this on a speed run. And, but it's sort of the same thing. We're hitting like very similar issues.
Totally. I mean, this is the kind of like AI as normal technology argument that like even as labs come up with just incredibly capable models, people tend to be slow to change or organizations are slow to change. And so it can just sort of take time for these technologies to filter through companies. At the same time, I think people look at what has been reported about Anthropic's revenue and they say, it doesn't seem like it's taking that long this time around, right? So I think we're still trying to like hone in on what is the actual rate of change here.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Do computers make you more productive?
Yes. Yes, they make me more productive, but do they make me more productive feels like a different question than do I work less because of computers, if that makes sense.
So like because you can do more stuff, you like do more stuff. You can like fit more things in the same 8 hours or whatever.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, like to be candid, I used to record one podcast episode a week. In addition to writing a couple of newsletters, I'm now experimenting during this mini series with doing a couple podcasts a week in addition to writing multiple newsletters. And AI is a reason I can do that. It is an incredible research assistant and podcast producer. And so I'm able to produce more, but I don't feel like I'm working less. And that's not a complaint, by the way. That's just sort of like how I'm navigating this moment.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel the same way. Like I feel like I can do so much more and all this stuff like I just didn't get to before because I didn't have enough hours in the day. Now I can do. But there's this like little there's this other like weird historical thing where like in the 90s when computers were being adopted by companies, like the personal computer, like like after the mainframe, after these like big industrial computers that cost like millions of dollars, at some point they got miniaturized. So like the average startup, the average company could just like get computers. There's this question of like, are computers making you more productive? And actually what people were complaining about is that they're not. In the 90s, like this was like an open question, like do computers actually make you more productive? And like now we look back on it, it's like duh. Like of course they do. Like I can't imagine like going back to pen and paper. But there's this really awesome Harvard Business Review article. I think it was like 1992 or 1996 or something. And essentially the case it was making is like they studied a bunch of companies that were adopting computers and they were like, okay, these ones are getting more productive. These ones are not. What's the difference? And what they found is the ones that are getting more productive are the ones that threw away all their paper, filing cabinets. They threw away all their like paper and pens and all their like desk drawers and stuff. And they just replaced it with like a computer at the center of everything. Yeah. And then there's all these other companies that were still like, they have like teams of people writing everything on hand by pen and paper. And then there's like a computer in the corner that's like used for something. And so like the first category has big productivity gains, which increase. The second category does not. And I think it's kind of similar right now because like at Anthropic, we really organize everything around Claude in every way. Like when people join the company, if they have like questions about like, how do I write code or, like how do I contribute to this code base? The answer is you ask Claude. If your question is like, how do I file like, like an expense receipt? It's like, you ask Claude. If the question is like, what's the next company holiday? You ask Claude. So it's sort of like all the stuff that you used to have to do manually, you used to have to like go to someone, you used to ask Claude. It's like, it's just at the center of everything. And I think this is what we're starting to see with a lot of companies that are really getting it is they just put Claude exactly at the center of it. It's not like a thing on the outskirts somewhere. It's like you have to change all the business processes and that takes time. And it's a lot of change to figure it out.
Absolutely. And I've been reading recently about what they call Solow's paradox, which I think you basically just referred to, but it's this observation by an economist in the 80s that, he said the computer age is everywhere except for in the productivity statistics. And the reason was, despite, what at the time felt like a very large build out of computers, you were not seeing people get much more productive. But as you just noted, Boris, like eventually those gains did materialize. And it was because the companies had just reinvented their workflows around the new technology. And so the question now is, how quickly might it take how quickly might it take the economy to do that? I wanted to ask you a couple more questions on sort of like fine-grained software engineering, because I've heard you say that coding is effectively solved. You haven't written any code in 6 months. Sometimes I see engineers pushing back on this idea, and they say, look, coding is not only about typing, it's also about judgment and taste and critical thinking, and agents can still be quite bad at those. So what do you make of that critique? Like, are there parts of coding that remain unsolved, or is that, in your view, that's just has become something else?
Yeah, I mean, the critique is totally right. I think this is one of those things that just gets like kind of taken out of context. So, the full quote is coding is solved for the kinds of coding that I do. And like for me, like I work on pretty simple code bases, like Claude CLI, like the CLI is like a pretty new code base, like the desktop app and the mobile app, like these are pretty small, simple code bases. We have so many enterprise customers, a lot of our customers now are like the biggest enterprises. It's not just like startups and indie devs anymore. It's like NASA is one of our customers. So it's like, they have really big, really complicated code bases. And so for them, like it's not solved yet. Like the model's still not perfect at it. It still makes mistakes. Its code isn't always perfect. And when you think about the kinds of stuff that engineers do, coding is a small percent of it. It used to be that it's like, if you look at my day, maybe like 50% of my day used to be like actually like typing code. But then the other 50% was like talking to users. It was brainstorming and coming up with ideas. It was like debugging and kind of just thinking through how something works. It was planning. There's just all these other things that engineers do that are not coding. So when I say coding is solved, it's like it's solved for the kinds of coding that I do, and coding is just a small subset of what engineers do. And you actually see this, for all the engineers at Anthropic, and I think more and more engineers in the industry. When the model does the coding, they're freed up to do all this other stuff that they actually enjoy doing a lot more, like
Right.
like talking to users and like figuring out what's next. And Claude Code has been just 100% written by Claude Code for over 6 months. That's true for a lot of things at Anthropic. Beyond Claude Code, that's true for Cowork. It's true for a lot of other products. And we're starting to hear more and more customers like this. Like,
Mm.
I was doing a talk for the latest Y Combinator batch. This was like earlier this week. We did a fireside, and I used to ask at the beginning of every talk I do, raise your hand if you use Claude Code. Now everyone uses Claude Code, so I stopped asking that question. And so instead, the question that I asked is, raise your hand if 100% of your code is written by Claude Code. And, this is like the latest, the most cutting edge startups, but they're all small startups. Usually it's like a few people. Half the hands went up. And then I was like, okay, raise your hand if none of your code is written by, the model. And there's one hand that went up. This is out of a
Ooh.
room of like a couple hundred people. And then
Yeah.
everyone else is somewhere in between. They were like between 50 and 100%. So I think like coding is starting to get solved for like a bigger and bigger percent of the code that we write. Like our team is an early indicator of what's happening in engineering. Engineering is an early indicator of what happens to everything outside of engineering. And so we're starting to kind of see this shift, and it started 6 months ago. And yeah, it's like it's accelerating, and we're starting to see more and more hands go up when they ask like, is it 100%?
Let me ask about another fear that people have about a world where the engineers aren't writing as much code. The fear is that people's understanding of their own profession will atrophy, and that might be dangerous in various ways. You haven't written any code in 6 months. Do you feel like that atrophy has started with you? And how do you feel about it?
There's there's one engineer on the team, Lena, that was still writing like C++ on the weekends by hand just for fun. Because she like still enjoys like writing the code. And I think there's always room for this. I think for me, this is part of like a much broader transition, and it's not about atrophy at all. It's just about like programming is always a thing that is in flux. Like my grandpa programmed in punch cards, like back in the Soviet Union, like 70 years ago. And for him, that was programming. Like there was no JavaScript, there was no, Python. That didn't exist yet. For him, it was punch cards. It was like piece of paper. There's a machine that like punches holes in it. Then you feed it into this mainframe. It processes it. Like a few lights light up. And when you talk about programming, like that's what it was. And then, like before that, like, like the Apollo program, it was like there was a room full of people, like often like women, like doing math on paper, sometimes like by hand. That was called programming.
Right.
And nowadays, like this changed. Like programming became writing machine code, then it became writing assembly code, then it became like JavaScript and Python, Java, all these languages that people use nowadays. And now it's like changing again. It's now you talk to the agent, and it's actually I think about to change one more time, where you talk to an agent that talks to agents that does the coding. But it's just always changed like this. It doesn't feel like atrophy to me. It feels like it's like a sea change in the technology.
My feeling about it has been that, like, I'm sure that using a graphing calculator like caused some of my math skills to atrophy, but my solution to that is that I will just continue to use a calculator. Like, I'm sort of fine to cede some of that stuff. Now if over time the calculator becomes super intelligent and tries to undermine me in subtle ways, like that would sort of freak me out. But maybe we haven't like crossed that bridge quite yet. Let me ask about another criticism that I sort of feel like is in this realm, which is, it seems like, every time a new model is released, we'll hear people say, this is really good. And then you check Reddit a few weeks later and they say the product has massively regressed. My sense that sometimes this is like a real issue caused by bugs. Other times it's just sort of a vibe. But I feel like people are concerned that because it's all just sort of AI generated right now, there isn't maybe sort of the same craftsmanship that we once saw in code. So I'm just curious what you make of these periodic backlashes we seem to see.
Yeah, it's actually sort of an open question what causes it. There's been a couple instances where it was real, and there was two that I know of, and we published like engineering, blog posts on the Anthropic blog about it because like if it's real, like we found it, we fixed it, and then we want to talk about it so people kind of understand exactly what happened. But I think in almost every other case, it's sort of like maybe it's like a honeymoon period where you kind of get used to the model, and at first it's magical, and then you kind of get used to it. Maybe it's something like that. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's really about craft because the model's code at this point is just much better than the code I would have written.
Hmm.
If you talked to me like a year ago, I would not have said that. I would have said the model is like kind of sloppy and like the code's not really good. You have to like triple check everything. It can make silly mistakes all the time. But that's just like simply not the case anymore. And again, it's just the model keeps changing. It's really weird because every other technology we use does not change this fast. But there's like if you tried the model for the last time, like a year ago, the model now is completely different. And so if a year ago you had to hand hold it and you had to triple check every line, now I just generally like let Claude do its thing. I ask Claude to double check the result. I ask Claude to like open the app and test it by itself. And then, while I do that, I have like, 15 other Claudes running that I've also asked to like do stuff like this.
Right.
But that's kind of what it is now. The code is actually just much better than what I would have written.
Hmm. But let me ask you about your Claude's form then. You asked me earlier whether computers make me more productive. I think it seems clear that Claude is making you more productive, but it doesn't seem like it's actually reducing the amount of work that you're doing. And I think this is kind of like an important thing to dig into if we're curious like what AI means for jobs. Because, it sounds like you believe companies are going to need fewer engineers, and yet at least for you, like, you're never running out of things to do. So like how do you think about that, like that question of, it's making me so much more productive, I'm not working any less? Will there ever be a case where making me more productive actually means I'm working less?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a name of there's like some paradox. I forget what it was, but there's someone that named this thing.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that it's actually really individual.
Hmm.
There's some parts of it that where it's up to the company because like depending on the business, there might be more need for people or less need for people. But I think actually a lot of it is individual preference. There was like like when the laundry machine was released. I'm gonna give like historical info because for me, this is a crazy technological change. Like I need history to kind of anchor myself.
No,
So
I
it's just
love it.
like
I love the stories.
okay, yeah. So this is just how I think about it.
Yeah.
So like when the laundry machine was released, I think the average person to do a load of laundry, it took like 5 or 6 hours, and you had to walk. There was some estimate of like 3,000 feet or something from one load of laundry. Because like the way that it worked is like you had to walk outside and you had to like collect the logs and the coals and you go back inside and you start a fire, you boil the water, then you take it out, you put it in the laundry, you like scrub it on the scrub board, then you have to wring it out, and then you might have to like repeat this for like your entire family, maybe like every day. And it was just like a lot of work. And at some point, the laundry machine appeared, and it just took it down like a lot. I think it took like 3 hours off the time it took to do a load of laundry. And this was one of the factors that let women enter the workforce in mass.
Hmm.
Like without this, like usually it was the women of the house, like not always, but usually doing this work. And then this means like you were just like stuck at home and you couldn't do anything else. But now it's like 3 hours freed up every day. And so like different people could choose how they want to spend this time. And maybe for some people the choice was, well, I just want to like hang out with my kids, or like I want to go like, walk the dog or read a book or hang out with my friends. But actually for a lot of people, the answer was, okay, I'm ready to enter the workforce. Like I want to go like work at a factory, or like I want to go work in an office job. And because the time was freed up, now you have this choice of what you want to do with this time. And I think it's kind of similar right now. It's like, it's similar for any technology. It gives you more choice.
Yeah. A couple of last questions about the software engineering. I've been asking all of our guests if a 22-year-old just finished their CES degree this month and came up to you and said, okay, now what? What do you say to them? Like, is there an entry-level job that is out there waiting for them, or do they need to like think differently about this like first part of their career?
My advice would be, if you're a person that wants to work at a big company, or you want to work like at a company, you can totally still do this. Like there are entry level jobs. There's a lot that you can do. But actually, if you're at all entrepreneurial, go start a startup. It's just like there's never been a better time in history to start a startup. Like it's just absolutely the golden age. It's like you and your agents can build a giant company. Like people are building like $1 billion companies, and it's just like a few people. Like for
Mm.
Claude Code, originally, it was just a few of us. And, we have so many customers where they're building like really big businesses and just really amazing startups. And it's just like, like one or two or three people. And one person with the right idea has so much leverage. I just couldn't imagine a better time to go and do it.
That's interesting because I feel like a lot of the view that we get from the AI world is like, model capabilities are advancing so quickly that like, will we even have companies in 5 years? But
Mm.
like, you think that, at least for the next bit, there's still plenty of room to start a company, get into business, make a product, all the rest.
At least for the next few years. I mean, if you really trace out the exponential, it gets really weird. I mean, there's like a version of it where like the idea of jobs kind of doesn't make sense anymore. The idea of companies doesn't make sense. The idea of software doesn't make sense. But, as you trace the exponential, it just gets weird. But I think in the meantime, there's so much to do. And, we're all just here kind of figuring out what the model means and what this thing can do. So might as well be one of these people that's exploring the frontier.
Yeah. All right. Last one on the engineering. If 3 years from now, do you think we will see more engineers, fewer engineers, or will it be impossible to answer because we just might not be calling them engineers anymore?
Okay, I think, okay, let's define it.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to call them engineers, but if we talk about like people writing code or people like using agents, like people using Claude to write the code, I think there will be 100 times more engineers than there are today. That's my
Wow.
prediction.
Wow. Okay. All right. Super interesting. Well, this seems like a good time to return to Claude Cowork, which you brought up earlier, and I know that you helped to develop. I would say this is the Anthropic product that I actually use the most now. I use it as a kind of editor on my columns. I use it to help me produce a podcast. I've been using it as a kind of financial advisor. Basically, you just create products, you add some skills, and it can kind of successfully imitate lots of different, roles in a workplace. Also, as a non-technical person, I just find the UI very intuitive to use because it mostly just involves like dropping documents, into a box. Talk to me a little bit about the road ahead for Cowork, and in particular, I'm curious whether you think it can solve for other jobs the way that coding is maybe now partially solved.
Cowork is just so exciting because we first started to build it when we saw people like abusing Claude Code essentially for things that are not coding. Like like someone like installing the terminal so that and like opening up their terminal, installing Claude Code in the terminal so they could do like their tax returns. And like this is like crazy. It's like that's not what a terminal is for, but it's like amazing
Right.
from a product point of view because like people really want this.
Yeah.
Um, I think the journey the next few months is going to be figuring out like how do we make this work really well for people that are not engineers. And this is something actually kind of new for us because most of our team works on coding, and now part of the team works on Cowork, and we're trying to kind of figure this out. For coding, it's actually pretty easy because the people building this are engineers, and so we just kind of build for ourselves, and it's really useful for everyone else. With Cowork, one of the harder things has been it's useful for just like everything that's not engineering. It's like it's useful for accounting and finance, and also for legal, and also for like I used it to like buy it like a clamming license so I can go clamming with like like the state of Washington. I used it like I said to like book flights and like concert tickets. It kind of does all this different kind of stuff. And so how do you make sure it's actually really good at all this stuff? And so I think the biggest thing is like we use it all day, every day. We talk to customers all day, every day. And then, I don't know, we just do the things that, a lot of customers are asking for. So I would
Right.
expect it to just like keep getting better at this stuff. I would expect it to keep getting better at running for long periods of time. And this is
Mm.
something that we saw for coding. Like a year and a half ago, Claude Code could run maybe like, 30 seconds without me having to interrupt it because the model just wasn't there yet at all. It just would go off the rails after 30 seconds. And now, like I run Claude for just hours and hours and hours. And every night I have like, hundreds or sometimes thousands of agents that are just running 5, 10, 20 hours. And this is just how engineering is done now. And I think the same thing will happen with Cowork. I don't know like what the kind of work is where you would want it running that long, but I think we're going to figure it
Mhm.
out because I think people are going to start to like knock down the doors and demand it because like they really want this.
It's an interesting question to think about. Like, honestly, it makes me feel a little bit insecure because if you're like, Casey, like, what's a task that you wish Claude could work on for 20 hours for you? Like, I would sort of flail a little bit. It doesn't take 20 hours for me to like report and write a story or make a podcast. But, then again, I think once that becomes available, maybe I figure something out. So maybe that's just sort of brings us back to the capability overhang that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's so hard to predict the future because this technology is so weird. But I think once you actually use the technology and like you use it every day, you kind of feel like you know what's missing because you feel it.
Yeah.
So it just becomes more obvious. I
I
think if
mean,
you asked me that same question like a year ago, like would I have run an agent for 20 hours? I would have been like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I have no idea what I would use it for. But now I do this like all the time.
And I suppose one thing that it can do, maybe that it doesn't today, is just like anticipate your needs, right? Like as it develops a better sense of who you are and what you do, as its memory improves, it can probably do a better job of guessing, like, okay, like Casey, you got 4 more episodes of this podcast. You haven't booked, the final 2 guests. I'm gonna brainstorm a list of those guests. I'm gonna draft some initial reach out emails. Like I'll put them in your drafts folder. Let me know if you want me to send them. Like these are the sort of things that I could imagine some like a human producer or coworker doing for me. And I can't imagine a world in the not too distant future where something like Cowork is doing something similar.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it also kind of depends like how do you define a task? Like maybe there's like a horizontal way and like a vertical way. Like maybe one way of thinking about it is like a task is everything related to design, or everything related to engineering, or everything related to like finance. But maybe like another way is like this kind of more vertical way. And like something that I experience every day now is I use Claude to do something. Let's say build a feature, and then Claude will like build the feature, it'll test it, and then it'll merge it, and then it'll kind of like launch the feature for me. Like just maybe something in Claude Code or something in Cowork. And then something that Claude started to do with Opus 4.7 is it started to become a lot more proactive. And a thing I've started to see it do is it'll launch the feature and then it'll be like, okay, great. I'm going to schedule a reminder for myself in 12 hours so I can like see what the user feedback is. And so if there's like any bugs, I can like go and fix that. And this is something I would have had to do and like remember to do. And I probably, I might have forgotten to do it. And so like when Claude does this, it's just like delightful. So I'm like, okay, thanks Claude. Thanks for kind of like thinking ahead a little bit. So yeah, there might be a
Right.
little bit more of that.
Hmm. I also want to toss in a question about Claude Mythos. This model is not available externally yet to most people. What we have heard about it from you all so far mostly concerns coding and cybersecurity. But I imagine that some version of it will come out before too long, and it will probably be good at stuff beyond coding. So I wonder, like, in your opinion, is Mythos relevant to the jobs question? Like, does this feel kind of like another step down the road of like the jagged frontier being able to do more work?
Yeah, I mean, it's another point along the exponential. This one, I think this one's a little further along than most of the jumps we usually make. This one is a particularly big jump. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, Mythos was particularly strong with cyber and with coding, and maybe there's some future version of it that's, strong in other capabilities also.
Yeah. Well, as we start to like zoom out a little bit and maybe talk about the implications of a world where more jobs are disappearing due to automation or maybe just transforming quite a lot. I think you've said in the past that you do think that this transition is going to be painful for a lot of people. Um, and Anthropic is in a unique position here, right? Like potentially it will be a source of unemployment among software engineers or people in other jobs. Does the company have an obligation to those people? Is that something that the government needs to be paying attention to? Or what do we do about this world that seems to be coming into being?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's gonna be mixed, like it is for any technology. There's gonna be good effects and there's gonna be bad effects, and we don't know the exact timing. We don't know the exact mix. Like you can just never predict it in the moment. Um, I feel like I do feel this pretty immense obligation, just like as an engineer, that there's always more that we should be doing to tell people about kind of what's coming, make sure they're able to use the tools, kind of educate them and bring them along into the future. So I actually feel this very strongly, and it's something that like the team and I actually talk a lot about. I think that broadly, this is not a problem that we can solve. This is bigger than one company, and you actually like really don't want one company to solve it because it could be the wrong solution. So I think like this is a society-wide question. It's something that we should be talking about. It's something that we should be debating. And I think the thing that Anthropic is trying to add to the mix is we put out economic reports, we talk about policy, and we generally just try to make it really obvious what we're seeing so that everyone else can decide what we do about it.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the number one thing that has gotten people to take these issues more seriously is just improvement in the quality of models, which I guess makes sense. Like when it's just purely at the realm of the theoretical, people have a hard time thinking through, okay, what do we do next? But then, once you like see a computer use itself, for example, I think a lot of people have that moment of like, okay, it's time to develop a strategy here.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is I think like one of the reasons why we build product at Anthropic. Like
Mm.
we're an AI safety lab. It's actually kind of weird to even build product. It's like really not obvious like why we should be like doing that at all. But actually one of the biggest arguments for building product, and this is like actually a debate like early on in Anthropic days. And one of the biggest arguments was we want people to experience it so that they can understand it, so that they can kind of play a part in figuring out like as a society what we should do. But if you like keep this technology locked away, so no one knows what it can do and no one can experience it, it's much harder for people to form a point of view about it.
Yeah. I also wonder if you've thought at all about like the let me start that one again. Our most recent guest on the show is James Manyika from Google, who's kind of studied like technology at the level of economies and whole societies, and he's really worried about what started out as a kind of digital divide. So not everyone having equal access to technologies like the internet or maybe a good laptop. And he's worried that that's about to transform into an AI divide. And it seems like the data that we've seen so far shows that the people who are getting the most out of AI are the ones already sort of like near the top of the income ladder. From your perspective, like, does Claude Code make that better or worse? Like, who do you see actually using it and not using it? And are there efforts to try to, maybe get it into the hands of people who haven't always had access to these kinds of cutting edge technologies?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple programs to do things like this to kind of like just spread access, and Anthropic does this. I think the thing that I've been just continuously surprised by is the people that get the most value out of Claude Code and use the most are just not at all the people I expect most of the time. Like we just did this hackathon for Opus 4.7 release, and the people that won the hackathon are not actually professional engineers largely. There was like one person that was there was an electrician, there was a doctor, there was a carpenter that like that used it to build an app. And we actually saw the same thing with our last hackathon with the 4.6 hackathon. Before that, I think it would have been like mostly engineers, but I think now the models are sophisticated enough that it's actually like not even engineers a lot of the time that are learning how to like really harness them. And
Mm.
this is a thing that we're seeing at kind of big customers also. So like as companies think about how do you adopt AI tools, obviously you have to think about how do you do this kind of like business process change? How do you put Claude at the center? This is like the biggest question. And every company is approaching it kind of differently. One of the ways that I've seen work the best is you just give everyone tokens. You make everyone feel safe experimenting, and the ideas will come from the people that you don't expect a lot of the time. It's
Mm.
not actually the like super senior engineer that was like the most productive in the past. Actually, the best idea might be like an accountant somewhere in the corner of the org, or it might be like a GTM person somewhere in a different corner of the org that like built some amazing internal dashboard that just like sped everything up a lot, or like solved some important problem that like no one even realized the business had. So I think actually like this is the future, and like this is the thing that we're going to start seeing a lot more of, and it's going to keep being surprising. And so like,
Mm.
yeah, it's important that people learn how to use the tools, because it's not necessarily the people that are, the most productive and the best with the tools of today that are going to be the best with the tools of tomorrow.
Hmm. Hmm. All right. Well, we've talked a few times so far about how difficult it is to like think through what life is going to look like in an exponential. So I'm going to try not to ask you to predict out too far. But if we had you back in a year, how much of the world of, let's just maybe keep it to software engineering, will look very recognizable, and how much would look a little crazy to us from today's perspective? A year from now, is there a world where you think we do start to see some of that automation kicking into gear, some, more big layoffs at companies that where they're citing AI as an example? What do you think we're going to be looking at?
I think there's going to be a lot of disruption in the next year. I think there's going to be a lot of big players that try to figure it out, and I think a lot of them will be successful. I think we're going to see some like traditional business modes go away. Like there's all these different modes that companies have, and some of them are here to stay, even despite AI. And then I think some of them are going to matter a bunch, less because of AI. And it's, so like a mode like network effects, that's actually like not going to go away. Like if you have like an app that gets more valuable with more people being on the app, it doesn't matter like who's building the app, or whether AI exists or kind of is an important force or not. Like that's still like just as important. If you think about
Right.
like scale economies, so like as you manufacture, the marginal cost of goods kind of goes down over time. There's like kind of a natural advantage your business gets from that, and I don't think that's really going to go away. But actually, other moats are going to go away. And so this is, for example, like switching costs. So like,
Hmm.
you're on vendor A and you want to move to vendor B. Actually, Claude can probably just move you from A to B. And like the,
Hmm.
the switching cost is not a giant moat anymore.
Yeah.
So I think businesses that depended on some of these moats that are going away are, they're not going to do well. I think a lot of them are going to figure out new moats. And actually, if you look at like all the big businesses today, like the biggest companies, they actually have a number of moats, because this is something they think about all the time. Like, how do we have a defensible business? So it's actually like not that new to them. And then I think, some companies are going to continue to do well. And I think there's just going to be, if I had to predict something that would be surprising today, it's that there's going to be a lot more innovation than we expect.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be a lot of new ideas coming from not big companies, but tiny startups of like 1 or 2 or 10 people. And I think the number of these startups is going to explode. There's going to be so many new startups exploring these ideas, because again, just like the leverage of one person is going to be insane. Like at
Right.
this talk at Y Combinator, there's a bunch of companies working on a bunch of different stuff. There's one startup working on like material discovery. So they were, they had this deck, and they were talking about how, there was the Iron Age, and then, there was like the Stone Age, and there was like the Iron Age, and now we're in the Silicon Age. And if we can discover the new material, then this is how we get into the next stage. And this is something where, as a tiny startup, there is just no way you would have been able to fund this, years ago. But now they're just using Claude to kind of discover this and kind of like scan over all the possible molecules and kind of ways to design these materials. And a team of just a few people can maybe make this kind of breakthrough where, 20 years ago, no way.
Right. So the companies may be smaller, but maybe some of the ideas are going to get better, and we're just going to see rapid growth among these small startups that have some kind of insight.
That's
Yeah.
my bet. It's like someone that knows the domain really well and has an army of Claudes can just do so much more than, what they could have done before, even if they had like
Yeah.
an army of humans doing
Yeah.
this.
If you have sort of sold one message consistently on this podcast, Boris, it has been buy as much Claude as possible at all times for all things. That's sort of what I'm getting coming across. Um, but it makes sense for the creator of Claude Code. Final question for you.
we're
Oh
we're
yeah, go
just
ahead.
like we're just like so. This is like hard to explain. Like I work at Anthropic, so like I have to kind of like sell Claude.
Yeah.
But I think actually in a lot of ways, like we just use Claude for everything, and there is this divide between kind of the way that we use it and I think the way that everyone else does. And so this is also kind of part of the job is to be like actually like you put Claude at the center and it can do totally new things that you didn't expect.
I mean, it speaks to what you said earlier, which is that if you want like AI to make you or your company more productive, you probably need to redesign your workflow around it and not just try to staple it onto some existing process. But I think that there's evidence that is true.
Right.
Last question for you. In addition to everything that you are doing with Claude Code and Cowork, you are also amazingly omnipresent on X and Threads. I see you every day troubleshooting users' problems, offering tips on how to use Claude. If you could automate that part of your job, would you? And how close are we to that world?
I have automated it, but I prefer to do it myself.
Okay.
I actually, the way that I did it is I have like a loop set up in Claude Code, and now I've actually moved it to a routine, and it just runs every 30 minutes, and Threads has an API, X has an API. And so it just, uses it, and it's really easy to aggregate the feedback and look at it. But actually my favorite part of my job is just interacting with people, even if they're saying something is broken or something doesn't work, or it could be like 10 times better. That's still my favorite thing because that lets us make the product better. And there's this thing in product where sometimes people look back and they're like, wow, this was like a moment of genius, or, like this product was, like someone conceived of it and just like built it and it was like perfect. And that's just like never the way it ever works. And, like Claude Code has so many flaws. It's so far from like being the product that it could be. And the only way to make it better is to listen to people, especially when they say something doesn't work, and to like keep improving it and keep making it better. And this is actually the way that awesome product is built. And this is the only reason that Claude Code, it's still so far from amazing, but it improves a little bit every day. And that's the reason.
I mean, it strikes me that's also a really like human part of your job, right? Like when you're talking to somebody who is using a product that you made, it's probably reminding you why you started doing it in the first place, right? And I feel like those moments of connection feel really important at a time when we're not always sure what our value is going to be that we're bringing to like an AI-enabled workplace.
Yeah, that's right. And like we're all trying to figure this out together. This is sort of the thing. Like we have some hypotheses about where this is going. There's a bunch of stuff that we're building because, we think we know where it's going. But, I'm actually often wrong. Like not all of my guesses are right. Often good ideas come from, all sorts of people, and, you never know. So you just have to listen, and you have to kind of try a bunch of stuff, and sometimes it works.
All right. Well, Boris, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Casey.
Platformer is produced by Lindsay Chu and edited by Fitz Harris at Story and Sound. You can watch this whole episode on YouTube at youtube.com/Casey Newton. My email is casey@platformer.news, and we'll see you next week. Take your team from AI novice to AI native with Atlassian Rovo. Go to rovo.com to learn more today.